Here we go. I'm broadcasting right now. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Just want to welcome you to the second chapter of the AltaPro Cybersecurity series of free CLE webinars. What we want to do right here is just jump right in and let's kick the session off. We want to spend as much time on the content as possible. Hi, I'm Todd Mapes, and I'm AltaPro's VP of Business Development, and want to welcome everyone to what we think is going to be a very informative and valuable session. This session, by the way, is entitled No Rest for the Wicked, which we mean are to be cyber criminals, who I guarantee you are not resting, even as we speak right now. So this webinar is all about social engineering and features KnowBe4's Erich Kron. Now, if you're not familiar with KnowBe4, they're a highly recognized leader in the area of delivery of security awareness training. And Erich himself is a well-known expert and accomplished speaker in the areas of cybersecurity and this rapidly expanding phenomena that we now know as social engineering. Hosting the session, once again, is AltaPro's own risk pro, Jay Reeves. So before we get started, and more importantly, so you can get the CLE credit, we need to go over the housekeeping. All right. So first and foremost, to download a manuscript of the webinar, you can go to altaprorpg.com/postwebinar, or you can check your chat box, which is going to give you that link right now. You can click that, download all the content that you're about to see. This will be approved for 1 hour of CLE. To get the CLE, you got to do a few things. First and foremost, you got to complete the survey at the end of the webinar to receive your credit. And in that survey, you're going to input 2 code words. Okay, one that's going to be given to you right now in chat, and one that'll be thrown up later in the webinar that you need to record, write down, and again, input those into the survey. If you don't do that, we're gonna have a hard time getting the CLE credit. There's also gonna be a couple of questions that come across during the webinar that asks if you're still listening or watching. Just respond yes, obviously, and we'll be able to move on from there. If you're participating via phone, you can email us at info@altaprorpg.com. We'll send you the form that you need to fill out to get the CLE credit. Also, if you have questions, and we're sure you will, just use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. We're going to set aside probably about 10 minutes at the end of the webinar to address and answer some of the really, really good questions that we get. In any event, we're going to record this session, and we're going to answer all the questions we get in a document that we'll send out at the conclusion of the webinar. I guess with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to the risk pro, Jay Reeves. Jay, take it away.
Thank you, Todd. Hello, everybody, and welcome to AltaPro Live. As Todd said, this is chapter 2 of our ongoing series of webinars that bring you some of the country's top cybersecurity experts sharing insider tips to keep your practice safe and successful. My name is Jay Reeves. I'm better known around these parts as the Risk Pro. This guy is the personal on-call practice management consultant for any lawyer insured with AltaPro. And here's a little wellness tip. If you're having a bad day, if you could use a boost of self-esteem, try this. Get a headshot of yourself, Photoshop it onto a superhero body, and then every morning spend a few minutes just gazing at yourself, or several hours gazing at yourself. See how much better you feel. We got a great program for you today. Before I start, though, let me say this on behalf of everybody here at AltaPro. These are extraordinary times. Nobody has lived through anything like this. I sure haven't. I started practicing law back in 1981, the dark ages of IBM Selectric typewriters, carbon copies, terrible haircuts, the debut of MTV. First video, by the way, was The Buggles, Video Killed the Radio Star. And in the 40 years since then, I can honestly tell you, I've never seen anything even remotely, pun very much intended, remotely like the situation we're facing now. So the big message AltaPro wants to send you at the outset is, we really hope that you and your family, your friends, your loved ones, and your law practice are safe, healthy, and successful. And we're here to help you. Our guest today is Erich Kron. As Todd said, he's the security awareness trainer for KnowBe4. And I first got to know about Erich when I was reading a story in USA Today a couple of months ago. It was a story about a ransomware attack on one of the stars of the television show. I see Erich nodding his head. One of the television show Shark Tank, a ransomware attack. Erich was interviewed in that USA Today story as an expert on the particular sort of business email compromise scam that was successful, by the way, in hooking this victim. So we were thrilled when Erich agreed to come with us today and to share his expertise. Erich, greetings.
Always happy to do that, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And why don't we start at the start by taking a look at the landscape right now? What are some of the threats out there? And what do you say, Erich? Let's bring our audience into the conversation right from the top and ask them to evaluate the cybersecurity level in their own law practice. So here's a question for you to answer. Erich?
That's absolutely a great way to start this. I find that a lot of organizations, they're kind of aware of cybersecurity, but they haven't really thought about how prepared am I? And so this is a great way to start it, to understand as we go into this. And sometimes what we'll find is by the end of some of these presentations, when we've actually learned about what's going on, that may change a little bit, usually a little bit more towards we may not be as prepared as we thought we are. So that's the idea here, is to kind of give you some ideas and some thinking points by the time we're done with this as well.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I have represented lots and lots of lawyers over my career, and I've audited a lot of law offices as a risk manager. And I can tell you that good lawyering starts by being honest with yourself and being self-aware. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? Where can I improve? So here's some results, Erich.
Yeah, okay, so that's interesting. You know, the top one, obviously, 32% says it's all right. So that tells me, yeah, there's room for improvement. You know, only 4% said we're toast. Hopefully we, at some point in time, can get that to 0, because nobody really wants to be in that. But if you look at it, it's great is only 9% also. So we definitely have a bell curve going on there. And, you know, it's very interesting. The current threats and attacks that are going on these days, we're going to start by talking about, you know, the elephant in the room, COVID-19. This started obviously earlier this year. And we started looking at some of the trends early on as far as how these attacks were happening, what was happening in the phishing world. And what we found is the attack numbers related to COVID-19 really spiked. Now, I did see a thing actually just this morning from Microsoft, said that it's dropped down a little bit since then, and that's to be expected, right? A lot of what happened in the beginning was chaos and pandemonium as people were moving out of offices into homes. But if you look at this, on the week of March 8th through 14th, what this is talking about is brand new phishing templates we saw related to COVID-19. And on that March 8th through 14th week, we saw 16 new templates. Okay, that's actually still pretty busy to have brand new templates. The bad guys don't put a lot of effort into this. They just recycle what works. So that was a surprise. But the next week, the 15th through the 21st, it was up to 36 new templates. And, you know, what really knocked our socks off was the next week. And that was 94 brand new templates. I'll tell you this, the bad guys, the attackers, they really don't like to work. They like to just bathe in the money and the information that's coming their way. They really don't like to work hard. So this will tell you how quickly and how beneficial it was for them to turn around and start making these brand new templates and actually do the work. And some of the ones we saw were rather interesting. So we had the stimulus thing. And the stimulus thing was interesting because, you know, the government went up and they said, you're going to be getting a check or you're going to be getting a payment. And then there wasn't a whole lot of information around that. And so what that did is that spurred a lot of confusion for people and a desire to get information. They wanted to know, how's this going to get to me? How's this going to work? What if I didn't file taxes? Is it direct deposit? All that kind of good stuff, right? So the bad guys jumped on these. And they started putting out ones like this. Says it's from American Express. Obviously, it's not. This link to a Google Doc, which probably American Express is not going to be sending out, right? But the idea here is they're trying to authenticate your account. In other words, they want you to give them your account information to authenticate it, right? And we all know what that means. That means empty it. And this was one way to do it, to get people to do that. And sometimes it would send them to a fake account to look like they're logging into their bank. And sometimes it was doing more like documents and things like that that may be infected. But they were basically trying to gather information. And on a similar note, you'll see like this one here. This actually used the WHO, who was in the news every single day in the beginning, if you'll remember. It was a big deal. So they tried to use their reputation to get people to go here, also with the idea of the stimulus check. What you'll notice is the things that I have underlined are actually things that if you hover over them, you can see the hole in things, right? Like the reply to address for the WHO is not gmail.com. Guarantee it, right? But you got to know how to look for those things. So
Eric, Eric, just a few days ago, I got an email. Subject line said your PPP loan, 4 Ps. That was news to me. Obviously a bogus, and it was a wonky, sender address. But let me throw this question out here right now. I'm a solo lawyer. Maybe I'm a small firm lawyer. I've got a good antivirus program. I've got some firewall protection. I hired this IT guy who, yeah, it's my son-in-law, but I hired this IT guy to come in a couple of times a year. Do I really need to worry about this stuff?
So, antivirus is definitely one of those things that you have to have, Jay. There's just no getting around it. And it does do some good. The problem is a lot of antivirus software these days, especially, are designed to look for trends that have already happened. So with them moving around and doing new templates and things like that 94 times in 1 week, it takes time for that stuff to update. Now, some of the better ones, they actually look at activities that may happen on your computer through heuristics or even AI, artificial intelligence pieces. And that's very powerful. That's very helpful. The problem is a lot of these attacks, they don't even really rely on giving you a virus or malware, right? It's all about you putting in your information somewhere and giving that up to someone else. And frankly, antivirus just doesn't look for that sort of stuff, right? And so we have other ones like this, like these COVID-19 ones. This was actually sent out, it was supposed to be, from the White House instruction for coronavirus. And if you remember in the beginning, there was the whole everybody needs to work from home sort of thing. But there wasn't a ton of guidance. So the guidance was coming out very piecemeal here and there. And so what this did is it actually drove people to want that more information. And so they would go and they would fall for this because they thought that this was the new way to do it. Now, what happened here, this actually went to some malware in a document. It took them to a place that looked like it was the White House page or a White House page. And then from there, it actually linked them into where the document was. And the document, you actually had to take some steps, like enable content, which is like the macro sort of thing, and allow editing. But a lot of people still fell for it, even though they had to take those steps. So this was powerful. This was using the White House to be credible. And this one here, it's almost laughable. But when you think about it, the amount of stress that people are under falls into it. This was supposed to be from the VP of the United States, Mr. Mike Pence. And if you'll notice, the grammar errors in here are terrible. The Vice President of the United States down there that's circled. And basically what they were doing is saying, we saw some bad things through your business. And if you'll notice also, though, there's no links here. The idea behind this was to get you to reply to it and say, I didn't do any of this stuff. And now they've opened a communication channel with you, right? So there's no links, there's no malware. That's the whole idea here. And it's very, very, it's very valuable to do that because once you open that established communication, it goes from there. Now, in this case here, you look at it and you go, wow, and who's going to fall for that? But there were a lot of small business owners under a tremendous amount of stress at this time. They're having to figure out how to pay their employees if they can, if they're going to keep their doors open, how they're going to function. And then something like this pops in the middle of it. People fall for that sort of thing. And it's kind of scary, but it does happen. And that's the human attack. We're going to talk about social engineering in a bit. This is another piece of it, which is interesting. We've seen a lot of these kind of ads, right? It's called clickbait. And you see them all the time. You won't believe what this person does, or 10 things that blah, 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 blah. Number 4 will blow your mind, right? And so people click on that because there's actually some psychology behind it. It's pattern interruption, and there's something called the information gap theory. Now I have up here the Carnegie Mellon explanation of the information gap theory, but basically what it boils down to is they give you a little bit of information and you want to know the rest of it. We are compelled to know the rest. We don't want to miss out on that. And these are remarkable. We see them everywhere. Why do we see them, Jay? Because they work. And so this is the kind of stuff that's going on all the time right now. We're seeing this go on over and over again. They refine what they do, they improve on what they're doing, and continue to be successful with these sorts of things.
Well, speaking of clickbait, Eric, we're all working from home now. We're making adjustments as to where we work from home, as to how we practice our profession. And the virus has not just introduced new email scams, it's changed our expectations. It's changed the way we operate. And so let's ask our audience, what do you think most of these email phishing folks are looking for? Is it money? Yes or no?
Yep. And you know, it's interesting with these attacks. So what you see with these attacks is they may be after wire transfer, right? Who hasn't seen that one, where it's somebody requesting some money be sent or gift cards be purchased, right? So you see that sort of thing, but you also see information. A lot of these are after information. Sometimes it's your login credentials. Sometimes it's something else.
And let me say, Eric, for lawyers, they're not after necessarily just your money, but perhaps your client's money as well. It wouldn't be unusual for a solo or small firm that does real property law to, at any given time, be holding millions of dollars on behalf of their clients. The bad guys can get to this. In addition, lawyers have an ethical duty to keep data confidential and secure, data that's very valuable. Financial information, health information on their client, bank accounts even for their clients. So money, yes, other motives too, but looks like our audience understands the money.
Yeah, and you know, I'll say this, Jay, even when they're after information, ultimately, they're trying to get money out of that information, right? Whether it's selling it to other bad characters on the dark web, whether it's, you know, other sorts of ways, ultimately, this is almost always about money. The side to that is sometimes intellectual property, especially like, you know, in certain nation states, they go after intellectual property, which is also something that you may have access to with respect to this. And so, but ultimately, 99% of the time, this comes down to money. And the interesting thing is they're still after money even when you're working from home. As a matter of fact, we see a lot of these attacks still kind of going down that way. And when you're working from home, there's some interesting changes that happen. And there's some interesting things that we don't think about that are actually, they're things we don't consider when we're not working from home. So let's cover some of those. First of all, smart devices, right? You work in your corporate environment or your office even, and you may not have these around. I know a lot of places don't have smart devices. We're talking about smart speakers. We're talking about the Alexa, the Google Home sorts of things, right? This is an interesting stat. 29% of households owned at least one smart speaker at the end of 2019. And that number keeps exploding. If you remember around Christmas time, all of the, you know, Best Buy ads and everything was, oh, get this and get a free speaker, get a free blah, 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 blah. These things are being put out there immensely. And you know, I've used one at home. I actually really liked my Alexa. She told me what the weather was like and gave me news reports, and it was fantastic. The problem is when you enable these devices are always listening for that key phrase, or they're always listening for you to ask it a question. And a lot of this information is actually recorded and oftentimes sent up to people in their corporate office or wherever it is, to review that and try to improve on it, right? So there's been issues where they have overheard things that they probably shouldn't. And we always have to understand that there's a recording device running around you pretty much at all times. And so it's important to be very, very cautious with these if you have them. This is, again, not necessarily always a problem in the office, but at home, we're so used to them being there, we don't really think about it, right? And the same goes true with smart cameras. I know so many people that have cameras in their home just so when they're on the vacation or they're on the road, they can check in real quick and make sure, the cat's still running around, or the house is in good shape. We put those things up, we set them up, and they're wonderful in how easy they work and how inexpensive they are. But when we're talking about working on things from home, we have to understand, do you have a camera behind you and it can see your screen? Well, a lot of times these camera feeds are even being stored in cloud in other places. And sometimes the terms and conditions of those say, we can review this at any given time. Now, if you're talking about client information, you're talking about customer stuff like that, you don't necessarily want that stuff on your screen being transmitted over to the data warehouse in China. And so again, this is something that when you set up cameras in a corporate office, security people or whatever, they generally try to keep that sort of stuff in mind, keep it off of the screens. But at home, a lot of people have it on their entertainment center or something like that and don't even think about that. So this is something you need to ask yourself, can your work be seen or heard by a smart camera? And another thing is, and this is also a really big one, Wi-Fi. So many homes have Wi-Fi. Many of them don't have the same protections as what you have in the office, right? A lot of people are just using whatever router came with their, with their Spectrum or Frontier or whatever their internet service provider is, right? And they're not really designed to be super secure for like office type environments. And this especially gets really crazy in high density areas like New York City, right? You have all these people that are basically working on top of each other in apartment complexes, especially working from home. So if you go to pull up, your Wi-Fi you're connecting to, there's 35 or 40 different hotspots to choose from. If you've ever been in that situation, and I have, it's pretty eye-opening that there's so many. Well, this is a device for $100. You can buy this device, and its entire purpose in life is to intercept your Wi-Fi signal and basically capture your traffic in between. The more dense the area is, with the more types of Wi-Fi access points on at the right time, the more value a bad guy is going to get by dropping one of these in that area. And these can run off a USB battery pack. These can run off, I've seen them actually put them in soda cups, and you can't even see them there, right? It's amazing. And so we have to be cautious and know the signs. There are signs if somebody is intercepting your signal, like you go to a secure website and it says the certificate is invalid. You need to be very cautious with that kind of stuff, but you need to know to look for those sorts of things. And again, this is a $100 device. And last but not least, this is very important. Our mental state in 2020 has been crazy. It's been quite a year in 2020, right? I'm glad the murder hornets took a little bit of a break, but so far, we've seen a lot of stuff going on. People are under a huge amount of stress. Working conditions changed. A lot of organizations weren't prepared to do work from home. There's been an information overload, but a lot of times that information doesn't contain the key things that people really want. And so we become mentally weary, and people forget about that. There is a weariness that can come mentally from having to process all of this incredible information everywhere. And not only that, supply chains have been interrupted. Toilet paper hard to get, alcohol and hand sanitizer nowhere to be found. People started acting really, really dumb about this kind of stuff and hoarding it all over the place. This has just been an ongoing thing since the beginning of this. So
Eric, I want to jump in too.
Yeah.
For some of the less techie lawyers out there, working from home raises all sorts of analog, old school risks for confidentiality breaches, such as people walking into the room, a guest showing up at the house, the kids grabbing something, somebody walking by outside if you're working on your patio. So the whole environment of our work life has changed, and change brings vulnerability.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to think of it as kind of like if you're working in airports or you're working in public spaces, you generally take a little bit more precaution as to who's looking and what. At home, though, we're so comfortable, we tend to forget about that sometimes. So, that leads to this emotional state leads to being prone to social engineering. And we're going to talk about that in a second.
We sure are. And, you know, we tend to let our guard down.
Yeah.
If we're working in pajamas, for example. We may have a tendency to take shortcuts because we're at home and it doesn't even feel like we're on the job, right? So let's ask our audience, when working remotely, do you think any of your employees will cut security corners? And which of these risk management steps do you think would be important to prevent that?
I'm really interested to see, what we end up with here. Because it happens, and people don't always think about I'm cutting security corners, right? It's just, maybe this policy can't apply here because I'm working from home, or I don't have this tool because I'm here working from home. So they sometimes don't take those steps that are required, or they're just distracted by all the other stuff. Again, there's a lot of stuff going on. I mentioned the mental health thing in the last slide. I know of one organization that when they went home to work, they actually gave their people 5 days off of work to deal with collecting the toilet paper, to deal with stocking their cabinets, because they knew that the distraction would be there during that time. And they said, just go take care of these things during that time. And that was a very important thing, believe it or not, for security as well as everything else. So this will be interesting to see how this turns out, Jay.
Yeah, this question came, Eric, from a ABA survey that I blogged about on the Alta Pro blog. It's really an interesting question, and now might be a good time to remind our lawyers that knowing about technology and the risks that are out there is not just a good idea, it's your ethical duty. In fact, the very first rule of professional conduct, Rule 1.1, says to maintain competence, you have to stay on top of, quote, changes in the law and its practice, including benefits and risks associated with the technology that you're using. So it's not only a good idea, but you can get reported to the bar if you don't keep up on some of this stuff. Eric, we've got some results here.
Yep. I think that's actually good. More than 50%. They feel, that more than 50% are going to do that was the leader, because I think it does happen. And again, I don't think it's always, something that they mean to do. It just kind of happens. But neck and neck on question number 2, providing with secure laptops and having clear specific rules. I would say that these definitely go hand in hand. These are absolutely key things. I do love the idea of providing people secure laptops and or equipment to be able to work from home. That way it's managed better. You don't have that issue with crossover between personal and company stuff. I mean, how many people use their personal computer to do things and then their kid comes in and plays games on it, an hour after work is over? That's happening all over the place. So yeah, those are actually, in my opinion, these are the top 2. And so I'm glad to see that they ended up there. So talking about this and cutting corners, that's actually kind of very, very strongly related to social engineering, because social engineering is the practice of getting people to do something by using our humanity against us. And oftentimes what happens is the social engineering piece falls in because somebody is willing to cut a couple corners on a policy or a procedure because someone has convinced them that they need to do it. So I'm going to start this section out with someone you may have heard of, Sun Tzu, right? Wrote a book a little while ago, Art of War. He sold a couple copies of it. All warfare is based on deception. And this is a key thing. It really is based on deception. And deception is what social engineering is all about. It's about taking humans and leveraging our vulnerabilities against us. And I love this slide too. This is from, it's called Mr. Robot. Never found it hard to hack most people. If you listen to them, watch them, their vulnerabilities are like a neon sign screwed into their heads. We all have vulnerabilities, whether that's helpfulness, whether that's, honestly, greed or, and I don't want to sound like that, but, getting a super great discount on something, right? That's a vulnerability. If people are drawn to that and they tend to fall for that. So this is a very true story here. Now, I'm going to demonstrate something here, something you may have never seen in the world of PowerPoint presentations, and that is I'm about to do a magic trick. Okay, so let's get started on that, Jay. First, I want you, everyone in the audience, let's pick a card, pick any card, don't care which card it is. I'm going to make your card disappear. So pick your card, have your card in mind. Here we go. So through the magic of this PowerPoint transition, and that's where all the magic happens, is in the transition. I'll bet your card is missing now, right? Jade, is your card gone?
My card is
Yeah,
gone.
it's magic, right? Well, yeah, everybody should have their card gone. Why is that? Well, because there's a couple things going on here. How did we do that? Well, first of all, we started with this group of cards, and second, we ended with this group of cards. Now, what do you see about this? Well, they're actually totally different sets of cards. So no matter what card you pick in the first one, it's gone. And the idea behind that is we get you focused on these certain things, and then you don't notice when the other stuff happens, right? So if you would have had the second group of cards be like, 2 through 10, you would have seen the thing right away. You would have seen the difference, right? But by getting you to focus on the card you're removing, that's focus redirection, you don't see what's going on in the background, and then we fool you with the pattern. Go ahead, Jay.
Eric, this card trick, and remind me, never play poker with you, right? This card trick gets at an even more fundamental notion of risk management, which is organization. And old school organization of your case files, whether it's digital or paper files. I audited so many law firms back when I was doing risk management. Lawyers' files looked like a hurricane had hit. The office was totally disorganized, and it seemed impossible to know not only what's in the file, but what's missing from the file, which this card trick illuminates. You don't know if that return of service, if you actually put it in the file or uploaded it to your digital file. You don't know if the verification is in the file, if it's a mess and not organized. So it really gets at organization and being in charge of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I know somebody, I'm not going to call them out on it, but a friend of mine, he works for an organization. They were doing a security program, looked at their PII that they hold for people, and found like 2.5 billion records. It's a pretty large company that they didn't even realize they were holding on to. So not knowing what you have is also very dangerous. And that can play in here. Now, the other thing I do want to point out about this trick is if I turn around and do this trick on you again, you know how it works and you'll spot it immediately. You go, oh, yeah, well, I already know how that plays out. Educating people on how some of these sorts of scams work with the social engineers is a huge piece of understanding it, because once you understand the mechanism, it's not this great magic trick anymore, right? Now, this comes into, again, with the deception. The root of deception is our brain's ability to filter, interpret, and present reality. And it does do that. Our brain does a lot of filtering. For example, if you look side to side right now, you probably don't see your nose. Why? Because your brain actually filters that out of your vision, and it does it all automatically without us seeing it. It does that with information as well. If you've ever been on a call with somebody who has a heavy accent, and you realize that you don't understand what they're saying until a second or so later, that's because your mind is processing and filtering and then filling in those words, even though you're not used to hearing them that way. Your brain is a remarkable thing. And if you ever want to see some stuff, there's a series called Brain Games out there that you can watch. It is fascinating, the things that they do. And so as we talk about that, we're going to talk a little bit about this piece here. Spies, magicians, con artists, pickpockets, they all use this principle. And I'm not going to get too deep in it, but we're talking about like the OODA loop in this piece here. If you haven't heard of the OODA loop, it's observe, orient, decide, and act. It was actually designed for aviation warfare and making quick decisions while in the midst of all this kind of stuff, right? And this is actually kind of just a layout of how our brain works a lot. And the way it works is this. If I am in a room, let's say I'm doing a talk, and I observe the room around me and all the people in it, I orient myself. Where am I in this room or in this situation? And where do I want to be? Well, I want to be 2 steps to the right so that these people can see me here. Well, I will then decide to take 2 steps to the right. I will make the action. And then I will observe. Am I where these people can see me now? Look at the room. It runs in a loop. It's a constant way that we find out where we're going. Well, the trick is, the ideal situation is if the bad guys can hijack your OODA loop, they can influence your action. And where this comes in real strong here is observe, orient, and decide are critical thinking skills. These are easily impacted by emotions. If you ever think about the times that you're really upset about something or get mad about something or something is just going on, how easy it is to make critical thinking decisions during those times. And that's why social engineering is largely an emotional attack. They go after people to get them upset, and then by disrupting their critical thinking, they can actually influence the actions that people take. It's a very, very powerful tool, and it's something that we are all vulnerable to just because we're humans and we're people. It's kind of scary.
Eric, in these stressful times, I found that I don't observe things. I don't notice things that I might have if I were calmer, or if I were less preoccupied about what's going on, or if I were less stressed and tense. So observation takes a big, big hit when times get crazy like they are now. Lawyers every day have stuff coming at them from all directions. Their plate is overloaded. So not only does the lawyer have to observe, but you got to get your team to help you out. The whole staff has to be on high alert for some of these things, right?
Yeah. You know, the more stressful the situation, the more narrow our vision gets. You know, we've all heard of tunnel vision. And if we've ever had that feeling, you know, our vision becomes very, very focused on things. Our minds focus on things. This is a normal reaction. And if you want to learn a little bit more about some things, if you're fascinated by this stuff like I am, look into system 1 versus system 2 thinking. One is very much your reactive kind of keeping safe, sort of instinctive reactions, okay? And the other one is where you're actually applying common thoughts, right? There are times where something has happened, you know, you've been somewhere, and let's say someone kicks a soccer ball and it comes right at your head. You duck, you grab the ball, or you knock it away. You did not stop to think about that. That's your system 1 sort of thing kicking in. It just happens as a reaction. And our bodies are wired that when we're in high stress situations, we tend to fall into that thinking pattern. And it's great for survival. It's not great for actually thinking out decisions. So this is where, again, they can kind of disrupt that.
Eric, it occurred to the Risk Pro that this would be a great topic for a staff meeting in the law office. Plus, you get the opportunity to say OODA loop. I mean, how fun is that to say OODA loop, right?
It is fun to say.
But
yeah,
really,
absolutely.
an interesting thing to talk about as a team.
Yep. So, you know, let's talk now in a minute here about future expectations, Jay.
Sure.
What do you got here?
We've got a polling question. Recently, my firm was targeted in a social engineering scam that arrived via, click all that it may apply.
Oh yeah, I'm interested in this one too, because there are lots of different ways that this applies.
Don't they all come from email?
No, not at all. You know, we've all received that phone call. At least a lot of us have received that phone call that says things like, our social security number has been suspended, right? Have you ever had that one?
Yeah.
That's a big one, you know, they get that people get. I was getting it 3-4 times a day for a little while. Or you get the one saying, you know, your car's warranty is going to expire. Well, those are all done because there's timing and urgency involved. But it's pretty fascinating how even those are just regular scams, but they actually do these in such a way in businesses to collect information sometimes as well. So I'll be interested to see how many people have seen this in here.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Also, Eric, one of the things I really love about KnowBe4, this is not a commercial for KnowBe4, but your company does a great and fun job of tracking the email subject lines that are most likely to hook us. And I'm going to read sort of some of the top subject lines that the bad guys use. But first, let's take a look at the results of the survey here.
Yep. No, I'm not surprised at all that email is number 1, because most of us have received something like that. It's good that people have recognized that these text messages and phone calls are a social engineering scam too. So I actually like to see that there's numbers involved in that. I mean, text messages, a lot of people see those in banking things where, hey, this is such and such bank, I need you to confirm your account, right? That is a social engineering attack, and we see it all the time. So talk about these, Jay.
Yeah, here's some of the top subject lines. See if you've received an email with this subject line: password check required, delivery attempt, maybe from UPS, FedEx, deactivation of your email account, updated employee benefits. I mean, who's not going to click on that, right?
Yeah.
Revised vacation and sick leave, staff review. I want to find out what my boss is saying about me. And here's my favorite one. One of the most popular email phishing subject line: new food trucks are coming your way. I mean, who doesn't want to know that, right?
Yeah, food definitely gets people, believe it or not. People are always interested in what's going on in the kitchen. It's pretty amazing, you know, all of these kinds of attacks and those subject lines. What we see a lot of times is the same premise being reborn with some different subject lines. A lot of times they will be something that is close to topics of the time, right? So we know the fourth quarter, people are spending money for Christmas and, you know, the holiday time. So we see a lot of these shifts with the same premise start changing towards having that focus. Or the first quarter, people are thinking about income tax and taxes and all of that kind of good stuff. So we see a lot of those types of things go out around that time. That's why we try to tell people, when you're training people, don't just give them one training a year, but start reminding them throughout the year and point them to things that are going to be relevant in the near future, because they're going to see them. We might as well, you know, spend 15 minutes telling you now how this is going to happen. So moving into the future expectations piece here, I wish I could tell you, oh, there's going to be all this crazy stuff. But the fact is, I expect that we're going to see more of the same, only more refined. So I've been talking to the guy that, honestly, he's one of the key guys that reviews pretty much all of the reported emails that come into us, which is quite the job. And every time I talk to him recently, I've been like, you know, what's new? What crazy new thing are they doing? And what I usually get is they're doubling down on what's been working, because they haven't had to change that for a while. Now, the key things we've seen in the industry is like ransomware did make a key change this year, actually end of last year, where they started not only encrypting the data on your machines in the office or wherever, but they're also exfiltrating data. And that happened, that key thing happened because people got better at being able to restore, and it impacted their wallet. But they didn't make that change until the big things quit working. And the fact is, most of this stuff is still working entirely too well. So CEO fraud is one of these things here, also known as business email compromise if you're talking to the FBI. This is that wire transfer stuff. This is the, hey, this is the CEO or this is the president. I need you to go out and buy a bunch of gift cards that we're going to give to our clients as a thank you, right? Those sorts of attacks that we see all the time with that, they're refining those and they're getting better at getting people to fall for it. Something we have to understand is most of these attacks that we see these days, by large amounts, are done from organized organizations. This isn't like the kid, you know, drinking Mountain Dew and eating pizza in their mom's basement. These are very organized attacks. And so they look at what works, and they do like we do in marketing, where we go, oh, it's an A/B campaign. Oh, this one works much better. We're going to continue to do that. This kind of stuff, business email compromise, where they try to get into an account, take over invoices and things like that. This is just going to keep going, right? We saw this one happen here. CEO fraud hits BC lawyers for $2 million, right? And you think, oh, I don't do that. But you mentioned it earlier, Jay. This wasn't their money that they lost. This was money that they were dealing with on behalf of customers or clients that was lost ultimately because of business email compromise scams. In other words, they got into email accounts and made this happen. So, you know, you don't want to be on the hook for this kind of stuff going on, quite frankly. And you don't want to be that office that has fallen for this sort of thing or been the cause for it. If they get into your email and start emailing your clients and redirect payments or things like that. This is something that we see all the time. Another one is, oh, go ahead,
Eric, I'm looking at an FBI results of an FBI report. Business email compromise losses, $26 billion in the U.S. in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And another little interesting note here in North Carolina, I'm in beautiful Chapel Hill, North Carolina. North Carolina lawyers just a couple of months ago started getting emails from the State Bar Association notifying them that a grievance, a professional complaint had been filed against them. You can imagine the mental state of a lawyer getting a grievance notice from the State Bar. Unfortunately, there is no State Bar Association It's the North Carolina State Bar, but a number of lawyers fell for it, and the State Bar has issued an alert to be careful for this.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head there, Jay. The emotional state they're in when they get that. Remember, social engineering, most of what we're talking about here is all an emotional attack. That's the idea. You go, oh, and they don't check to make sure that there's a state bar association, right? They just go, oh man, I can't believe this happened. This has got to be that guy that I talked to. And you know, your brain goes into that kind of mentality, or it's like, who could have done this, right? Again, we're impacting your ability to make critical decisions and influencing your action. I don't know if on that one it was that they had you go log into a portal or something like that. But man, this is a perfect example of the sort of thing that happens, right? We see this thing in supply chain and invoice fraud. This happens all the time. They get into an account and you know it's time to pay a bill or something like that. And from that account goes out the email and says, hey, this is where you're going to send the payment. And the bad guys, since they're in the account and they control it, they pop up and say, oh, wait, hold on. I gave you the wrong account number. Use this one instead, right? If you're dealing with real estate transactions, whether it's corporate or personal stuff, we see escrow redirection happen in exactly the same sort of way, through title companies, through all of those areas that deal in some of these purchases of real estate. This is a huge deal, big enough that you know, the FBI actually put out an individual warning about this sort of thing. There was a couple here, individuals that lost $70,000 of their down payment in Florida personally, due to this. But we see it all the time in corporate. So they'll get into that though, and the idea is they'll either redirect some sort of a payment, or they'll just generate fake invoices looking back at your old emails to people, generate a fake invoice and send it to them. This other organization pays you because you're a known vendor. Well, they're really paying the bad guy, because you're a known vendor. And next thing you know, when it all comes out in the wash, somebody's going, well, why did we send you this money? You're going, I didn't ask for it. And then it kind of goes downhill from there. It's remarkably low tech, honestly, but it works. This is a real quick example here. Yeah, this is a quick example here. This guy, 48-year-old Lithuanian guy, he scammed Google and Facebook out of $100 million. And the way he did this is so simple, it just blows my mind. He created a couple of offshore accounts that had names very similar to their actual vendors, and then sent them invoices on behalf of those major vendors. And Google and Facebook paid it. And then when it all showed up, when they reconciled, they went, wait a minute, where'd this go? This guy, he ran off with $100 million. Talk about low tech, right? Just spin up a couple of similarly named companies and send invoices. And they go, oh, okay, I recognize that company. Boom, they pay these things. Now, the other thing that's happening, again, we're talking about emotional attacks here, is we're seeing more and more social media influence on things. And they're using this to drive outrage and anger in a lot of cases, or to, again, sow that seed of uncertainty or doubt that gets people to then want to click on something to get more information. You know, like, oh, there's a second round of you know, stimulus checks coming, and they'll put something in there like that. And then you click on it and you have to go through some steps where you give up information or you download something infected. This sort of stuff happens. And we saw this on the right-hand side there. That was the coronavirus stuff. Carnegie Mellon did a study, and they found that almost 50% of the tweets that were going out, the social media tweets around coronavirus, almost 50% were done by bots or with bot-like behavior. So these aren't even real accounts. They're putting up stuff like that. And a lot of it is designed to be divisive and get people outraged. That's the two emotions that make people do stuff are outrage and anger. Those are the top emotions. And so they do that. Same thing with the George Floyd stuff. Things related to George Floyd and police brutality, a study found that over 50% of those were being done by bots. And it's a very powerful thing. Again, social engineering is going after your emotions, right? The greed, the Nigerian prince scam, curiosity, self-interest, urgency. I don't see many things at all where it's a phishing email and they're like, whenever you feel like it, get back to me, right? That's not generally a social engineering scam. Fear and helpfulness as well. So if you feel these things, what I tell people is, if you get an email, a text message, or a phone call and it elicits a strong emotional response, take that step back, apply that critical thinking, hover the links, make sure these are the ploys that they use to puppet people. What do you got?
Yeah, Eric, in addition to the outrage and the fear and the anger, back to the basic emotions, lots of us are just tired. We're mentally wearied. Our guards are down, our defenses are down a bit. We're distracted. We want to find out what's going on, and so we may let something slip that otherwise we would have caught. And it occurred to me as I've heard you, and we're about ready to get into some questions, it occurred to me that this information is not only good for our lawyers, but what about your clients? You may represent some small business or big business clients, or just some normal everyday clients. What do you think they'll think of you if you call them up and say, you know what, let's have a little discussion on phishing attacks and social engineering and how your business can be safer because of all of this. So they'll love you as a lawyer.
Yeah. If you can provide them resources for them to be safer and more secure, people really appreciate that sort of thing. It can also be a great, point of contact if you haven't contacted somebody in a while. Hey, just want to let you know, I've heard about this thing going around. I've seen this thing going around. Want to make sure you're aware of it and you're safe. It's a great way to do that. Now, I want to show this out here. We're going to put it out in the chat here. I love this thing here. It's a quick cheat sheet if you want to have these around. It's a PDF. You can download it and print it. Basically, it's red flags. So you get one of those things that you go, wait a minute, and then these are the things you look for. So if you hover over the from, did it actually come from that person? The hyperlinks. It's a quick reminder that a lot of people print this out and put up in their cubicles or in their home office right now, so that when you get that, whoa, wait a minute, now you can go and take a look at that. So having said that, you can download that. Let's move to some questions, Jay. I know we're running a little bit short on time here.
Sure. And again, that PDF, it's available, right? You can, so let us know. We'll make sure you get it. Let's jump into some questions. One of the first questions that came in related to the $99 router Wi-Fi gizmo you're talking about. The question was, what can I do to defend against that, Eric? And let's do a lightning round here so we can, because we got a number of questions.
Biggest thing that you can do to defend against that is honestly, if you get those pop-ups that say the certificate is invalid, you have an issue there. Be very, very cautious. Make sure you're not connecting to open Wi-Fi access points, that they are in fact ones that require you to put in a password. So if on your Wi-Fi list it says open access point, you have an issue there. You want to be very, very cautious with that. Make sure it requires you to put in a password. Those are the key things you can do about that to make sure that these can't get in the way, because those security features do work.
Here's another question. How secure is Zoom?
Yeah, Zoom has been an interesting one, right? More issues came up with Zoom when people moved very quickly to their home offices and started doing these Zoom meetings without securing them at all. We've heard of Zoom bombing, where people come in and do things in the middle of a meeting. That's generally a published meeting or something like that, or they were just grabbing some random things and doing that. But that's because people weren't requiring passwords to get into meetings. They weren't requiring someone to be logged into Zoom to get into meetings. They weren't doing waiting rooms beforehand in some of the meetings. Zoom itself was also under a lot of heat for some of the security vulnerabilities that they found. But you have to understand, when something grows the way Zoom did and explodes in popularity, security researchers then turn their focus on that and they find things they never would have before. It doesn't necessarily mean that one thing is more secure than others. What it does mean is somebody's looking really hard at this piece here. And they did a great job dealing with that very quickly.
Eric, you talked about email.
Oh, I'm losing you here a little bit, Jay.
Not hit reply, but start a new email to the sender instead. Does that also, pardon me?
Oh, I got you back now. I lost you there for just a second. Sorry. Oh, I think the internet is hurting here.
Were we Zoom bombed, Eric?
Yeah, I don't know. One of our internet connections is getting a little bit sketchy here, so not a problem. So I'm reading the question I think you were asking here. You talked about email phishing scams not asking you to do anything.
Right.
Just hit reply back. if you don't hit reply and start a new email to the sender instead, does this also create the same risk? Well, what's going to happen is a lot of times they will fake who it's coming from. Like they say it comes from the CEO or an executive, when in reality, it didn't come from that person. So if you create a new one and use the real email address for that individual, that's going to be a whole lot better than hitting reply. Now, the same thing you can do though, when you hit reply to that email, go up there and make sure it's actually going to the person that you thought it was going to go to. And that can make a big difference right there. That can actually fix that problem right there. So having said that, Jay, I'm not seeing you very well right now, but I think we have time for another couple of these. Let's see. One of the things that they were asking, how secure is Dropbox? Now, Dropbox is an interesting thing. A lot of individuals use Dropbox, and Dropbox can be fairly secure. But what the problem is, the bad guys actually also know about Dropbox, and they know that a lot of people end up saving information to this Dropbox, which is a fantastic place to go get data and information. So they know to look for that. For example, even ransomware there for a while, when there were ransomware attacks, they would look for the Dropbox software on there and make sure that they were also encrypting things on Dropbox. So while it's not inherently insecure, it's also, you have to be careful how you use it and what information you put out there as well. If you're going to use a Dropbox account, make sure you have multi-factor authentication enabled, where you're getting basically a text message, or use an authenticator app to be able to get into it. Don't just rely on username and password. So having said that, Jay, you've been popping in and out on me. I don't know if it's my side or your side, but what we'd like to do, I think, is we will answer these questions afterwards. If we didn't get to yours already, we'll send you the answers with this a little bit later. So what I'd like to do right now as we're closing up is I just want to thank you all for being here. This is my contact information. Reach out to me at any time. That's my email address. I have 2 Twitter accounts. I use @Erich Kron more than the others. But feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to help people understand, or hit me up on LinkedIn, whatever you need to do. Always love trying to share information with people and help them out. So having said that, I'm going to turn it back over to AltaPro now for the conclusion.
Wow. That was, I don't know about the participants, but that was compelling. That was fantastic information. And we want to thank both you, Erich and Jay. Terrific job. The dialogue was great. The information was great. Before everybody signs off, just a reminder, you've got to get the survey complete. You should be getting that at the conclusion when we hit the end key. It'll send the survey out. You'll still have another week to respond to the survey. You need to input the 2 code words, Alta and Pro. Okay, we've sent it several times. And before I officially, hit the end button, I want to express our sincere gratitude to both Erich and Jay for their time and the great information they passed. And we especially want to extend a big thank you to all of the participants. This has been a record participant level for AltaPro's webinars, and we hope you found this to be a worthwhile and valuable use of your time. The AltaPro Risk Purchasing Group, as a general rule, we're committed to delivering high quality, value added services in addition to the policies that you obviously get through us. And if you are an AltaPro insured, we do want to take a minute and just thank you for your business. So with that, we're going to sign off and wish everybody to have a safe and happy and great upcoming weekend. All right? Have a great day.